Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. And as Gina said, yeah, we intend this to be interactive. We want to create dialogue. And so hopefully the title tipped that off, that we're going to do a roundtable, which means we're going to do a couple breakout sessions. We'll have some framing context, and then we'll get into a couple breakouts. With the breakouts, there will be specific topics, and then I'll also have Google Docs, and I'll prop you up with those, but I want you to know that we'll have things organized. It's not going to be dead space, and there's going to be a way where dialogue can be shared across groups as well. And you'll have access to all of these materials and any of the contributions going on after the session. So feel free and use the chat throughout, please, to make comments as we're going forward. So just setting the little bit of the context here. So it says end of semester. I know some of you might be in quarters, so end of term. Also, we're going to be looking at going back a little bit further first, and then we'll come into the present, and then we'll think about going forward. So there'll be a little bit of a transition before we get to just the end of the semester wrap up, if you will. So you heard my introduction more than enough there. Unfortunately, Carrie is ill today, so it's just going to be myself. So my partner's not going to be with me, and we'll carry on. I've got good colleagues here on board today as well. And as you can see behind me, a couple puppies roaming around that are distracting me just a little bit, but it's a good thing. So one of the things in our webinars that you often will see, for those of you that have been in these before, is that we really talk about creating these experiences that are humanized, inclusive, and engaged. And one or more of those elements always comes up regardless of the topic. And so that relates to thinking about your situations, certainly, and thinking about your students as we go through this reflection process. The pictures there are meant to kind of tell you, what we're all going through and what things have been like, what the scenario has shifted to in the last couple of years. And so just sort of reflecting on that briefly. But what I want to do is kind of do a high-level brainstorm to start with before we go into breakouts in just a bit, and just do a Padlet exercise. So we'll get that into the chat here. And then I'm going to go to the Padlet as well on the screen, but you're going to be in your browser and you're going to be responding to a couple prompts in the Padlet. So you can now see that in your chat. So if you click on the link, I'll do the same here. And then we'll be in our browser modes, and you all should see the Padlet in your browser. And I'm waiting for that to populate. I'll start seeing some little icons on the browser. There we go. I can see you. And so now looking at the three prompts, there are ways in which your work has changed over the last 2 to 3 years, ways your job satisfaction has changed over the last 2 to 3 years, and then how you foresee your working conditions the next 2 to 3 years. So just looking at that scan of things, what are some significant changes you've been experiencing? And this isn't all about the pandemic. There are other changes that have been happening. And then job satisfaction, how are you feeling with what's been happening recently? And then how do you foresee your working conditions the next 2 to 3 years? Are you seeing maybe that in the fall, things are going to be different? What might be the same? So losing students because of financial situations. Half remote, half in person. And so that's a positive in this statement. Okay, good. That blendedness is something that we continue to talk about, and that's going to be a reality going forward to different degrees, depending on the institution, the course level, student population, different decisions that might be made. But that blendedness is going to be here to stay to some degree or another. Meeting much less in person with faculty. So on the meeting here today, we've got faculty, we've got instructional designers, we've got faculty developers. We might have those in other staff positions or management positions. So I want to acknowledge all those perspectives as well. Wearing different hats. So maybe things have been more complex. Maybe that's related to more modalities taking place, more complexity of the situations, the teaching and learning situations. And feel free to add on to each other's comments. Your satisfaction has ebbed and flowed, and that could be typical. Maybe that happens every year, depending on the time of the year, the time of the term, what's happening, whether you're kind of in that middle of term sort of burnout, getting over the hump and trying to motivate toward the stretch, or has it been particularly so the last couple of years? Flexing with changes, I like that. Change can be difficult. We don't always like change or want change to happen, but good can come from it. We can learn and we can grow. So I like that flexing with changes. And I don't know if that's related to high flex at all, or just you like the term flexing, but I like that. More hybrid work going forward. Yeah, so the work situation is changing for faculty and staff. So there might be the possibility of you having a hybrid working environment. So coming to campus only certain days or only for certain circumstances or meetings. So we're seeing more flexibility in that regard. Harder to connect with colleagues and students. It does make it more difficult. There are some different types of efforts that you have to do for sure to make platforms like Zoom work. Maybe it's time to try something like Slack, which we have found to be really, really helpful to be connected in more of a synchronous type pattern. So that's something, if you haven't tried something like Slack, I would encourage you to kind of give that a thought. Hopefully feeling that I belong. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a pretty deep statement. Feel free to share anything on top of that if you want to in the comment section on your post there. But again, these are anonymous and don't feel like you have to divulge everything, but hopefully feeling that I belong. That should be in every scenario for sure. Mary, good question. Thank you for bringing that up about Slack. So Slack is one of those things that's free to a certain level of features and certain level of people that would be involved in your workspace, so to speak. And to be honest, I don't have the latest on that. I wasn't one of the ones who set it up for our work environment. But there is a free option there for sure. And of course, they hope that you adopt it more deeply and see more options that you want, and it might go more full scale at your institution, let's say, and then you would go into a paid account because it's working. But I would encourage you to explore that free option. Okay. I'm seeing a pause on the comments here. I'll keep looking at the chat as we go forward. Let me go back to the slides. And let's think about some situational factors. Some of these have come up, of course, through your comments, but let's just do a scan of some of these things, because what we want to do is kind of harvest those lessons learned, what was planned. And certainly there were some things that weren't planned, of course, looking back a couple of years ago as we went into the pandemic, as in my situation, California, looking back before that with the wildfires and closing down because of smoke and power outages and all sorts of things that were happening for years. Those are those unplanned challenges. And then, sorry about the background noise. What are the actual efforts and outcomes? What are some of the lessons learned? How can you incorporate any of the feedback that you're gaining along the way? And then what growth or adjustments have you made? So just some things to think about and kind of ground to, but let's get into processing a little bit more. So let me pull up the participants list and let's go ahead and just do 2 breakout rooms, Molly. And what I want to do before we actually go to those breakout rooms is I want to kind of orient things, because breakout rooms can happen in so many different ways. You can be just put into a room and not much said and not much provided for you, and maybe some good things can happen. But what I've tried to do is really model how a breakout room can hopefully guide a conversation and support a conversation, and that there can be some takeaways and there can be some sharing across groups as well. So what I want you to do is think about what you can share from your respective role, again, an instructor, instructional designer, staff, faculty developer, whatever that might be. And I'm going to just show you, give you a preview of what you'll see. You'll get this link in a moment. And so I've created a document for this first breakout. There's a couple topics here, and pick one or the other for your room. You can talk about stress, workload, burnout, and anxiety, and how that's been, and how you're managing, and how you want to work through that going forward. I'll show you the prompts in just a moment. Or you can think about technology, how you can leverage that technology effectively to improve teaching and learning. And then in your group, these aren't hard roles where there's a workload and high level of accountability. There's not going to be grading or a rubric to this, but try and think of who might want to be facilitator. And that just means helping to keep the conversation going through the prompts, trying to keep it flowing, maybe listening, maybe paraphrasing someone, getting more information from them, and then who can just take some notes into the doc, and then who can do some sharing out. So those are some things we want you to think about as you go through the process here so that we can get some dialogue going on throughout. And then what you'll do is when you get into this document, you'll look and see what room number you're in, whether it's room 1, room 2, or room 3, and you'll simply click the respective bookmark here, and then it'll jump you down to your page. And you'll be able to type in your responses for each of these. And if you type a lot, it'll just expand for you. You're not confined to that one row. Okay. Let me pause and see if there are any questions in the chat. Any questions about the breakout room tasks? So again, you'll pick one of these 2 topics that's up to you in your room. I'm going to look for just a second in the chat. Okay. So Molly, I think we're good to go. And for participants, let's go with 2 rooms. And we're going to see you in 10 minutes. You'll get a countdown timer. If we need to bring you back sooner, we will, but we're going to allow up to 10 minutes for the dialogue to take place, and then we'll come back and debrief. Okay, great. Welcome back, everybody. Let's go ahead and just debrief here. And I know that the purpose of the document is, so you can capture things within your group, but again, so groups can see each other's comments, and then you have ongoing access. So if any of you are doing breakout rooms, hopefully you've found different techniques to be able to do things like this, where you prop it up with you've got some tasks for them, some roles for them, a resource document for them, and then something that they can carry forward from that. So that's what we're trying to provide for you and model a little bit today. So let's see which group wants to share out first a little bit. Any volunteers? I see Elias.
Yes, I can chat for group. I was in group 1 with Sheila, Jen, Sandy, and I'm looking for the last name. I think I'm missing someone. Is it Mary? Mary. Okay. So we selected topic 2. I'm gonna pull my screen here. We selected topic 2, which is the leveraging technology topic, and some of the conditions we talked about were training, that we needed to have training for faculty to be able to access the technology, for students as well, for them to understand how to use the technology, maybe staff in our institution. For context too, we were a mix of instructional designers, professor, and a success coach. So we came from a lot of different lenses. We also talked about having the access to technology. So, what resources we had at our institution or our organization, so we can maybe purchase some of the tech to use, and then also problem solving, encouraging the students and faculty to be able to maybe learn how to solve a problem at 2 a.m. rather than always seeking and waiting for help. In addition, the pandemic was a huge circumstance to having to leverage technology, and also looking towards the future as we start to realize that there may always be a hybrid option or some sort of virtual option. This kind of changes a lot in how we use technology to design these new environments. Some challenges that resulted from these, the fear of technology, or maybe having too much technology, where we started to throw out these products and tools as answers, but they don't necessarily always fit the solution we're looking for. Having that learning curve and the time to learn all of these tools and ensuring they're accessible. And this has impacted our work, and yet sometimes it's very overwhelming to be able to manage all of these. The time crunch could be stressful. So some solutions we have is just to have a lot of support. Maybe it could be emotional support, financial support, so we have access to these tools and the resources to support the entire team. And I will turn it over in case anyone else on the team wants to share.
Great, thanks so much for reporting out. And yeah, if anything to add from the group, feel free. And just a couple of things that kind of stuck out. Yeah, training for sure, training for the new reality, if you will, and training in different ways, different access to training, as you mentioned, not having to wait till the next week for that workshop. And is that 1 hour workshop really going to cover what you need, or has it been set up to be more generalized? So how can you get training that's sort of specific in the moment or in your process? So I think we're going to see more shift to that for sure. And then the other thing, I really like how you keyed into the emotional and mental state of that for everyone. So how can that be taken into account? How that affective domain, how people are doing and checking in for sure. And then I guess the other thing that I thought of is, yeah, with technology, there's only so much you can learn and implement at one time and do well. So what is the next tool that you can learn? Try it, learn from it, make it work if you can. If not, move on. What's the next one? So don't try and grab. If you do, let's say, a boot camp type training and they give you 20 tools, you don't want to adopt all 20 of them. You want to find maybe the 3 to 5 at the most that'll work for you over the course of the next term, let's say. So yeah, it's kind of doing that wisely and being realistic and kind to yourself for sure. Anything else? I mean, even for the other group, anything else related to technology that you wanted to mention briefly? I mean, feel free in the chat. I'm looking at Jen's comment here. Oh, back to the Google Doc. Great. Yeah, Jen's comment is, as you're doing breakouts or different types of interactions, is how can you provide different modalities for people to contribute? So not everybody's going to get on the camera and speak. How could they do it in a document? How could they do it in chat? Absolutely. Okay, and let's see. I see Sandy's face from group 1. Sandy's been nominated for an Instructional Excellence Award at Seminole State College. Congratulations. Can they vote for you? Let them know. Give them the link. So congrats, Sandy. So I just happened to notice that the other day. Shout out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Group 2.
Anybody from our group want to volunteer? I can give a quick rundown. You guys would like?
Yeah, just an overview, sure. And then we'll keep it going.
So we discussed topic number 1. And as far as stress and burnout goes, we talked about some typical end of the semester stress that's always present is going on. And then we also discussed how switching schedules, going from remote to hybrid, and some folks are getting back into the office. Sounds like it can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. It's good for those of us who want some interaction, but also just switching your schedule up in general can be a source of stress as far as that goes. And then we do have some lingering challenges of the COVID pandemic, especially when it comes to student placement and things like that, as you know, different requirements from different sites can make it challenging depending on vaccination status and things like that. And then we also discussed a couple ways that we deal with stress and burnout, and the consensus of the group was that activity and getting out and moving, whether it be jogging or just getting outside, is very helpful. Tea and music were also brought up as good stress relievers as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Gina. And anything else to add from group 2? Feel free in the chat or on the mic. Yeah, thanks for stepping in, Gina. Awesome. Okay. Well, we won't leave all that behind, but let's go through a different process here briefly. Let's see. Let me get sharing going again. Juggle things here. Okay, so now let's look a little bit more closely at the student experience, and hopefully that's always what we have in mind. Our perspective and experience is important, but how can we always drive it toward the student experience? So let's do this one. I think I'm going to go ahead and kind of wing it on this one and just put it out there as an all group discussion. So let me put the document up here for time purposes and not to over breakout you. Let's go ahead and look at the topics here. So let's look at topic number 1 and think about connecting with students and creating community. How is that working for you? How do you see that going forward? How does that resonate? Let me go to screen share here. Sorry about that. I did slideshow, but did not set up the share from my end. Great, thank you. So looking at the topics here, topic number one, let's just think about and talk about briefly connecting with students and creating community. So as we've shifted to whether you want to call this hybrid, flex, or blended environment in different modalities, how is that working for you? How are you accomplishing that important connecting with students and also helping them to connect with each other and creating that community? And feel free, Elias, I see Elias's hands, and feel free, folks, to do a raise hand or jump on the mic. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I found this to be kind of challenging sometimes, especially in the hybrid setting where some students will stay online, some will come in person. One thing we did when I was working with the faculty and at our institution is we created this thing called community time. So it was a virtual community space that happens once a month on Mondays, and students are sent a flyer with a Zoom link and reminders to attend this community time. And at first it started with a few students coming in, and it's essentially just a space for students to share whatever they want. It doesn't have to relate to academics. It could be personal. It could be any challenges that they're facing. It could be maybe something that's reflected in the world today, covering news. And it started with a few students and it ended up building. So we would have like 15 to 20 by the end of it. So we saw some growth there, and the students who came did really appreciate that space we had because it felt as close as we can to the pre-pandemic and having students in person and building some sort of community.
Great, I like that. I like that. And then it always didn't have to be agenda driven. Did you have any sort of incentives to bring them there, food or beverages, simple things like that? That's used. No, just space and
just space.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was all
That's great.
virtual, so it was all space with no agenda. It was yeah, we would have maybe something in the back of our mind, like, okay, if no one's gonna say anything, then we'll talk about this. But we really had it as an open space for the students, and would hope, and usually they would kind of just drive the conversation.
Okay, sorry, I missed it. It was all virtual. And what I really like about it as well is creating that sense of belonging. Yeah, that's huge. Sorry,
one of the things that I do as a success coach with students is to connect them to each other, is to really listen and find commonalities. So, you know, if I have a student that says that they really have a strong interest in a certain area, and then later I hear of another student that has that interest, then I'd ask them both individually if they would, you know, want to be connected to each other. So that's kind of more the one-on-one connecting that I think can be helpful.
Great. Thanks, Sheila. What other techniques are people using?
So everything I do is virtual and remote, but like you could set up a Zoom room and advertise that room as like a hallway. So for students that are online and not in a physical space, that could just be an open room, and they could go into that room before or after class, just like they would if they were physically at a campus. There might be a seating area outside the classroom that they come early and kind of chat, have coffee, that kind of thing. Study groups can be done virtually as well, giving students a specific time of accountability where they all come, and then it doesn't even have to be that they're all studying the same topics. It can just be a time where they come, and then if they want to go off camera, they just know that that hour is for studying, and then come back together. That requires, you know, a facilitator probably, but
like it. Thanks, Sheila. Other ways with your courses that you're able to create and sustain a community, anything that you found useful, virtual or otherwise? You know, we have this tool. Oh, Sheila, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to throw one more out. I think too, for instructors, you know, if you can allow a little bit of time because I know sometimes you can't because of the topic you need to cover, but if you can allow a little bit of time to maybe even do breakout rooms and just have short, kind of get to know you so students can connect with other students, that's also for virtual.
Yeah, and it could start with icebreakers, introductions, those types of things. Yeah, and then having them share their experiences. It doesn't always have to be, driven to the academic topic, but how can you form that community? And then hopefully they go deeper into the discussions about the academic topics. Jen?
Yeah, I think always some type of icebreaker, but I think what we've kind of found with our faculty is starting with something that is not academic, kind of like what Sheila was saying. It's just like throwing a question out there, something to get them just connecting in any way that, there's no real right or wrong answer with that, where they can just sort of participate and interact with each other. I was also just part of a group. We had like a planning meeting, and so I didn't plan this, but I thought it was a really interesting way of getting people to work together. Is they gave us time limits on certain things and we had to work really quickly. So it was kind of a fun way of getting people to really get to know each other really quickly. You had to find a commonality that you have within 1 minute. We sat at a table and it was like 1 minute to, you could do something like that in a breakout room. Even I think we just say, okay, you're in this group. What is one thing that all of you have in common? And it was just a fun way of sort of quickly, like, do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Do you like to ski? It's just, you get people like interacting in a fun sort of way. And that helps to just build the foundation for that community later.
I like that. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, those quick minute tasks that just get them stimulated, and then you can get back to topic if you want to. I have a couple techniques. One I use is random object generator. I have a website that I can go to. It's random object generator, and I can tell it to come up with 3 objects randomly. And I just tell students, okay, who can find those 3 things in their house or setting quickest, and then bring that back to the Zoom camera. So that little things like that don't always have to be tied to a learning outcome, except for the outcome of creating community and engagement, and then them wanting to work together and knowing each other better. We have instructors who use Flipgrid for video introductions across the group. That can be another thing that you can do asynchronously if you wanted to. So some of these things you can do live, some of these things you can do through other tools like Flipgrid or VoiceThread. I'll just throw those out there. I didn't embed a lot of tools in this session. Let's shift to creating a humanizing and inclusive learning experience. How are you doing that for your students? And that's kind of one of our big things this year, is really focusing on the humanizing aspects. I mean, we always have, but we're really leaning into that heavily because of so many of the things that have been going on. And that's just such a need right now, is that we all feel this humanized experience that we go through when we're in the teaching and learning or the student success environment. What does that mean to some of you, humanizing and inclusive? How are you trying to do that for the students that you work with? I know Elias mentioned, just having that space that creates that welcoming and belonging, which helps to humanize things. The welcomes and introductions, as far as inclusive learning experiences, just starting off with an inclusivity statement that you might have. If you're an instructor, then that's something on your syllabus. It's something you can address day one. It's something that might be part of your welcome video that you create for students, which also helps to create connection. So you can do a couple things at the same time through a welcome video. Inclusive learning experiences. Do students see themselves reflected in the different types of examples you give, or the assignments, or the authentic learning experiences that you do? So they feel included, they feel like they will be successful. Other things on humanizing or inclusivity? I mean, that's certainly a topic that I could soapbox for a long time, but I don't want to take the dialogue. And I'm just pausing purposefully here just to see if there's anything else that would come up in chat or any hands raised. Okay, so good there. So let's go ahead and go back.
Jen has her hand
Oh,
raised.
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Jen, please go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, we're trying to get our faculty certainly to work towards the humanizing and creating the inclusive environments. One thing I think that I have found to be, I also teach, but I've found to be successful for getting students to feel like you really are concerned is just reaching out, even if it's something very small. Like we tend to focus, I feel like, with our students who tend not to be doing well, but it's also important to focus on the students who are doing well. So if a student passes in a project and it's excellent, I will, besides giving feedback on it, I specifically send a different email that just says, hey, you did a great job on that. Thanks so much. And I really feel like those type of emails have made students really feel that you are invested in them and their success, just recognizing their efforts.
Love that. That's so important. And that it's really about the learning process and how you can connect with them, and that frequent and timely feedback that you give, that it's not about the grade, it's not about the evaluation, that it's really about how learning takes place and what it means to each of them and how they're doing. Hopefully they're doing well. Great, you can acknowledge that. If they're not doing as well, you can check in with them and how you can support that. That triggers to me something that I think that CSU Fullerton did about a week ago, is they changed their academic probation to academic notice. And to me, just that change in language was so powerful, that it's not this probationary gotcha, clean up your act or get out of here by a month from now or by next term. It's really, oh, we've noticed you're struggling. How can we help you? That type of approach instead. So even sometimes just changing how you word things and how you approach it. I love what they did there. And to me, it's so powerful, that one word change, because then you can make it a whole different approach and a whole different dialogue. So anyway, that triggered me because that was something that really stood out recently that I saw. Yeah, probation is bad. There's that stigma, that stress, exactly. It's, you've got this window of time, this better happen, this better change, or again, you're out of here. Or instead, oh, okay, we all struggle. What's going on right now and how can we help you? Let's move you upward. So that type of thing. Okay. Doing a time check here, I want to go ahead and talk about reflecting. And I'm just curious, how do you all make time and space to reflect? How do you acknowledge how you're feeling? I think sometimes in the rush of things, we kind of have this calendar and we have an agenda and we go from task to task, but how do you make time and space to actually sit with your feelings? Do you like to do that in a quiet environment? Do you have a favorite environment? Do you put headphones on? Some people like to go to a chaotic, cafe or other environment. Some people will almost get meditative, not necessarily take notes, but maybe after that process, they'll take notes and write things down. And then how can you build in some affirmations as you go through that, some self-kindness, to think about the things that you're doing well. But then as you reflect, of course, thinking of changes you'd like to make. What lessons come from your reflecting? So if only, or next time, what could I have done differently? And then how can you prioritize things? If you think of maybe 10 things that could have happened differently, how might you pick a few of those that would be your biggest wins and prioritize those and set yourself up for success? And then think of those things incrementally. How can you make those changes over time? And then what is your target for change? When would you be able to do some of those things? So I'm curious to check in. What is your process in trying to reflect? Think of where you are, how things have gone recently. Maybe it's for a particular course or project or your role. And then how do you do that check-in and how do you make goals going forward? Anybody have anything to share? Process that works for you? I know for me,
I do.
Go, please, Sheila.
I do a lot of thinking on my own, but I find it helpful sometimes to reflect with a trusted someone, friend or something to, if you're trying to figure something out, to have thought through that yourself, but then bounce that off of someone else.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Yeah, maybe this is a process. You might go through a process like you see on the screen here independently, but then how can you engage in a conversation with someone who's a mentor or a loved one, whoever will listen and give advice or be at least be a sounding board. Others?
And the
What-
other
what-
recommendation I have is to keep a kudos file for your affirmations.
Love that. Kudos.
For
file.
instructors, that can be, and of course, survey comments that really stood out to you.
Mhm.
Or, other people you're working with when they email praise to you and that kind of thing. It's nice to just keep that as you go, because then when you're having a rough time or bad day or something doesn't go right, you can spend a little of your reflection time just rereading those. Oh, yes, I was good at this, or this,
Yeah.
I helped this person in this way.
Yeah. Or those are great reasons, or it may come in handy for some sort of personnel review process that you're going through. So if you're preparing your portfolio, your dossier to go through review or go toward promotion, then you have all of that information to actually work in your favor as well. So that validation internally or for externally. Okay, so anything, let me move you all off my screen over here a little bit. And just a couple of things that we find helpful at this time that are linked to, and so I just wanted to mention, if some of you have heard of our purposeful learning framework, is for instructors, we have this, and instructional designers can work with this as well, as we have this purposeful learning check. And we find that going into summer, a lot of instructors will maybe take a course that they want to work on for next year. And I know we don't want people to work a lot off contract during summer if they're on break, but the reality is coming into August, you'll want to do some of these gear up activities. And so a lot of people will do this purposeful learning check. And so we'll put the link into the chat for you for this purposeful learning check. And at this page, you can scroll down after you find out more about what it's about. You can actually scroll down and get access to the purposeful learning check. And it gets you to look at these 8 elements that you can see here, which have a lot of student centricity to them on the right side, especially, and think about those elements and how you're doing. And it's not meant to be evaluative, it's meant to be reflective and then lead you towards steps. What might be the next 3 things you can do to your course to make it even more effective for students. So this has been something that's been really successful that people have used to reflect and then make goals for instructional changes, for example. If you wanted something that was more of a structured support program, this is something that Elias mentioned earlier, is having sort of on-demand support. This is actually something we do provide if people are interested. We have a link here that we'll put in the chat where we have this faculty success program where you actually have somebody that would be available for you in real time that you could reach out to via phone, chat, or email and be able to then have this consultation and get this just-in-time support, whether it's a technical aspect of using your learning management system, Canvas or otherwise, or whether it's a more teaching type of tool or technique that you're trying to implement. You're trying to create more active learning, you're trying to use more formative assessments, whatever it would be. We have a lot of tools and templates that we would be able to give you. So we've got that for you available as well. So, sorry, that's just a stretch happening. And then upcoming webinar, what we have next coming up in a few weeks is for June, for Pride Month. We have Pride and Equity in the Learning Experience. We had a great session last June, and we're going to bring back Bee's Shell again from Colorado Mountain College, and she does a fabulous job in this area. It's an area she's been working in for about 25 years now and just does a great job. And she's a great facilitator. So we'll drop you the link in the chat for you as well there. And with that, I'll just pause us at the end. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about anything discussed today or any of the resources that were mentioned. I'd be happy to connect you with that. So I've got my contact information here for you. And yeah, Carrie, sorry, sick today, couldn't be here. But and then I don't know from this crowd if there's anybody going to the EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative Conference that's happening in 4 weeks. If so, let me know and I'd be happy to meet you there. You know, we can set up a time through the link here, the Calendly, or if you wanted to just go old school and email me, that works as well. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.